20 years ago, in a small town where survival mattered more than dreams, a poor boy stood outside a grocery shop with empty hands and tired eyes. His clothes were worn, his feet dusty from walking long distances, and his stomach had been empty since the night before. The shop was modest, stocked with basic food items, and run by a man who knew most of his customers by name. When the boy stepped inside, his voice was low but steady as he asked if he could have something to eat. The shopkeeper looked at him carefully. He had seen many people ask for help before, and experience had taught him to be cautious. The boy explained that he had no money but promised he would return to pay for the food one day. It was not a dramatic plea, just an honest request from a child who had learned too early what hunger felt like. For a moment, the shop fell silent as the shopkeeper weighed his options. Finally, he reached for a loaf of bread and handed it to the boy. There was no paperwork, no conditions, only a quiet act of kindness. As the boy accepted it, he paused, looked the shopkeeper in the eyes, and said words that sounded far bigger than his small frame could carry. He promised that when he became rich, he would come back and repay the debt. The shopkeeper smiled politely. He had heard similar promises before, most of them forgotten as soon as the hunger ended. To him, it was simply bread given to a child in need, nothing more. He waved the boy away, telling him to take care of himself. The boy walked out of the shop and disappeared into the crowded streets. The shopkeeper returned to his work, never imagining that the brief exchange would become a story remembered decades later. At that moment, it was just another ordinary day, and a promise that seemed impossible to keep. 20 years passed, and the small town changed slowly, almost quietly. Some shops closed, others survived, and the grocery store remained much the same, though its owner had grown older. His hair had turned gray, his hands now shook slightly as he counted change, and long workdays felt heavier than they once did. The memory of the poor boy and his promise had faded into the background of countless other moments from a life spent behind the counter. One afternoon, an unfamiliar sound drew attention to the street outside. A sleek, expensive car stopped in front of the old shop, standing out sharply against the faded buildings around it. People nearby paused, curious. A well-dressed man stepped out, confident but calm, and looked at the shop as if he recognized it from a distant memory. He walked inside, scanning the shelves slowly, his expression thoughtful. The shopkeeper glanced up, expecting a regular customer, but sensed immediately that this man was different. His clothes were tailored, his posture firm, and his eyes carried a seriousness that suggested purpose. After a brief moment of silence, the visitor asked a simple question, wanting to know if the owner of the shop was still the same person who had been there many years ago. Confused, the shopkeeper answered that he was. The man nodded, then shared something unexpected. He spoke about a day long ago, about hunger, about a loaf of bread given without hesitation. As the words settled in, the shopkeeper searched his memory, slowly connecting the past to the present. Then the man repeated the sentence that had once sounded like a child's fantasy, that he would return to pay when he became rich. Recognition spread across the shopkeeper's face. The boy he barely remembered was now standing in front of him, transformed by time, effort, and success. The moment was quiet but heavy with meaning, as the weight of 20 years settled between them. What once seemed impossible had just walked back through the same door. The man reached into his pocket, not in a hurried or dramatic way, but with calm certainty. He placed an envelope on the counter and then another beside it. Inside was not just enough money to pay for a loaf of bread, but a sum that could change a life. The shopkeeper stared at it in disbelief, his hands trembling as he realized this was far more than repayment. When he tried to refuse, the man gently stopped him and explained that this was not charity, but a debt finally returned with gratitude. He spoke about the years that followed that day of hunger, how he had worked tirelessly, taken risks, failed more than once, and remembered that small act of kindness during his hardest moments. That loaf of bread had given him strength at a time when he had nothing else. It reminded him that someone believed he was worth helping, even without proof he could ever repay it. The man then revealed he had arranged for the shop to be fully renovated. Old shelves would be replaced, debts cleared, and supplies restocked. He had also set aside enough money to ensure the shopkeeper would never again worry about daily expenses or medical needs. The gesture went beyond money. It restored dignity and security to a man who had quietly served his community for decades. Word of the moment spread quickly through the neighborhood. People gathered outside, drawn by curiosity and emotion. Many had passed the shop for years without knowing they were walking past the beginning of a remarkable story. The shopkeeper's eyes filled with tears as he realized that a simple choice he once made without expectation had come back multiplied beyond imagination. As the man prepared to leave, he thanked the shopkeeper one last time. He said kindness does not disappear, it waits. That day, a promise made by a hungry boy was finally kept, proving that even the smallest acts can echo across a lifetime.